Welcome to Evolve Through God. I just recorded an amazing podcast with Dr. Samantha Harte. She is a best-selling author. She is a keynote speaker. She is all about health and wellness, specifically mental health. And the conversation we just had, I can't even begin to tell you. She did not happen to find God in her life until she was 30 years old. So she's got quite the story leading up to that. And then she spent many years in active addiction and also in recovery, completely functioning, earning degrees from universities, being a student at Boston University. You would never, ever believe the things that she has lived through and how she actually found God and the work that she is doing to help other people. So I really encourage you to listen to this episode with her. We actually, at the end of the episode, have a little surprise for you. And one of the key takeaways and things that I loved about her episode is that she said, you know what? Borrow someone else's faith until you can have some of your own, which I love. Absolutely loved. So take a listen to Dr. Samantha Harte, and here she comes. Welcome to Evolve Through God. My name is Angela Goodman, and I am your host of this illustrious podcast. And I have to say, the guests that we have on today, we have been syncing schedules to record this for probably 6 months. And I've talked to her plenty of times in the last 6 months, always not enough. But that being said, Dr. Samantha Harte is with us today. She is a best-selling author, a keynote speaker. She is a physical therapist. I like to say holistic physical therapist. I think we've talked about that before. But she is an amazing human, and her story of finding God is so incredible. So without further ado, ma'am, welcome to the show.
Hello, we made it happen. We did. Here we are. I'm so excited. Can't wait for this talk. I've been on so many podcasts, but actually not one so far. God always comes up because God is a part of the story in my life, but not a podcast yet that is God-centric. This is in some ways a first.
Oh. Well, thank you for being the first God-centric podcast show that you've been on. I know it's, when this whole project came to me 2 years ago, I'm not sure. I didn't know anything about what was even out there about podcasts that were Christian-centric or God-centric for that matter. And so the fact that you bring that up, I think, is beautiful in nature. But let's get to you. Let's get to you, ma'am. So I know probably too much about your story. I usually like to not know anybody's story before they come on. So I'm going to try not to allow my knowledge of your story to blind our conversation today. But I would love to know a little bit about your story. Growing up, when did you first realize that God existed, or what was your life like before you got there?
Well, man, I didn't know anything about God, and I had no access to God until I was 30, which means that the front end of my life was unsurprisingly riddled with a bunch of chaos, self-ridicule, and uncertainty. And then if you add in a family of addicts, 2 very unhappily married parents, a sibling who was sneaking off and acting out and sexually promiscuous, God was nowhere in my purview. And the strongest influence I had in my childhood was my mother's. And my mother's, well, one of her favorite lines was, "There's no such thing as God. Anyone who believes that is a fool."
Wow.
And the only person you can count on is yourself. And, that, imagine that being drilled into your head with all the kids and with a personality type that was just an unrelenting type A. So I already had an innate desire to push until I dropped. And then you add in my mother's voice, sort of reinforcing that. Well, you
Mm-hmm.
had better be pushing,
Mm-hmm.
because when the ground comes out from under you, because it will,
Right.
ain't no one or no thing going to be there to cushion the blow.
No, man.
So it was like, good luck. I mean, good luck trying to enter adolescence, early adulthood with a sense of sturdiness inside.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when you like first remember her saying that? Do you have a recollection of how old you were when she started putting that into your head?
That's a great question. I don't know, but as
Mhm.
early as I can remember. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the most predominant memories are by the time I was 10, 11, 12. They start to come online really strong about sort of, the world is not a good place. It's not a kind place. Nobody's coming to save you. Definitely not God. I have a few core memories that started way earlier than that, but God in the conversation, I can't recall
Mm-hmm.
exactly, but
Mm-hmm.
without question, this was the earliest type of imprint. I had no shot, I had no chance of forming a different identity or belief system prior to what my mother was sharing. My father was very emotionally immature. Let's start with that. Docile in the wake of my mother's emotional wrath, and the power dynamic wasn't always that way. But by the time I remember anything,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter what my dad said or did. And the thing is, my dad wasn't really a godly man either. He was Jewish, and we, for a time, celebrated Hanukkah,
Okay.
not having any idea what it was baked in, what it meant, what it represented. But we would light candles on the menorah. We would say a prayer, didn't know what the prayer meant, and get presents. But then we would also celebrate Christmas with zero. There was no prayer of any kind. There was
Right.
no education on what that meant, and all I knew was that my mom said there's no such thing. So I just had no adult influential figure in my life anywhere that I can recall in my adolescence that spoke about God in a way that was uplifting, inspirational, exciting, that sparked my curiosity. I literally had a recoiling response for
Mhm.
years in my nervous system when I heard people say that word.
Yeah. You and I have talked about that because similar upbringings, right, in that way. And, I find it so interesting that those of us who end up having the closest connections in life are often the ones that had the most disconnection growing up, right? It was almost like our value, our ability to impact other people had to be stunted because if it wasn't, we would have been too beneficial for the mission.
Mm.
So you got
Yeah.
you were silenced effectively, right?
Yeah.
Without having somebody in your life that was like that. So talk to me a little bit about what did life kind of turn into then about the time you were 30? Like what were you coming out of and how did you start your relationship and come to believe?
Yeah. I mean, not super surprising that drugs and alcohol were a thing
Hmm.
that were around me a lot. My parents abused prescription drugs. My dad sometimes recreational. My sister very much abused and experimented with illicit drugs. And so there was this thing around me that was for a very long time a safety net. So there was my disposition of I've got to be the best at absolutely everything. And if I'm not, oh boy, is there going to be hell to pay
Mm,
within me, within me. And so to offset the unrelenting self laceration,
hmm.
drugs and alcohol were sort of right there. That was God to me. That was access to love and infinite compassion and forgiveness. That was the solution to my problem, right? So that really, really worked until it didn't. And
Yeah.
I ended up leaving Boston University, which is its own insane story. Whether or not we get into it is up to you.
Let's
I
talk
leave,
about it.
yeah. So I actually plagiarized for the first and only time in my life because I was getting C's from this professor and I was a straight A student and I couldn't stand the feeling of failure.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I could go to anybody. I the only option in my head was I'm just going to go on the internet and see who knows how to do this way better than I do.
Mm.
Borrow some of their sentences
Yeah.
and not sources. I don't remember at all at the time going in being like, the way you're going to get an A is by plagiarizing. So that's what we're going to do, and it's going to work out. I just remember the desperation of
And
my work.
you had C's. So it's not like you were failing, but in your
Was it?
mind, that was failure.
Oh,
Was
it
the
was
fact
failure.
that it wasn't an A. Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
in my mind that was failure. And so I end up getting caught. The professor gave me a 0, said, "See me after class." And I'll never forget this. He said, "I was wondering why this work was so much better than all of your other work.
Oh, wow.
And then I found it on the internet. So I'm going to give this to the academic committee and they are going to decide what to do with you." And the shame of
Yeah.
this experience. And it was so compounded by this man that my mom was dating at the time. My mom and dad did never in their lives got legally divorced, which was its own insane,
Mm-hmm.
toxic dependency.
Mm-hmm.
But they were physically not in the same house. They had sold my childhood home, lived separately. My mom was dating a guy. This guy she was dating was an active alcoholic, very egotistical, and a lawyer, and was like, "Oh, no way. We're going to get you out of this. We're going to get you out of this. This is ridiculous. You are a straight A gifted. This is," and literally wrote out an entire case of what I should say to
Wow.
defend myself. Imagine, right? This is yet another. There's so many
Yeah.
moments in my life where I wanted so badly to just be like, I messed up. I literally was so scared of not doing well that
Mm-hmm.
this is what I did. I'm not a cheater. I don't walk around plagiarizing. I swear to God, I love school. I love studying. I really messed. That's all I wanted to do. And he was like, that is not what you were doing.
Mm.
Mom was so ashamed that she was like, listen to Bill, just listen to Bill. I say this because it took a long time to realize that I'm not saying this is the reason I got into extreme addiction. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as correlation, not causation, there's no question that this happening, and by the way, the punishment was one notch less severe than expulsion, which would have been on my permanent record forever.
Oh,
It was
wow.
an 18-month suspension. So you want to come back here? Cool. All your friends are going to be second semester seniors
Yeah.
getting ready to graduate, and you can be a first semester junior should you want to make that choice. So obviously my choice was I will never step foot on this university again. In fact, mom, this whole dream I wanted of becoming a star, which was like I loved the performing arts growing up. Guess what I'm going to do now? I'm going to really piss you off because all this stuff you said I should do, get the degree, nobody can take it from you. Don't be a dancer. There's no money in that. It's not stable. Guess what? It was like, so within a couple of years of deciding this is the story I'm going to tell myself and everybody else, this is what I'm going to pursue, I was in active addiction, right?
Mm.
So the lights were out. I mean, as far as me and God,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
lights were out. And this was in my early 20s. I say all that because you asked about God. And so there were all these other coping mechanisms
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before God. And then there was in my late 20s, around 27, an overdose.
Mm.
Classic moment of my life. These extreme, I have extreme stories. Like the
What were you using at the time?
cocaine was the thing that really took me to my knees. I mean, I dabbled in all kinds of things, but that is the drug that, because I was, of course, bartending,
Yeah.
uh, to audition during the day and make money and
Mhm.
pay my rent in Manhattan at night. And so when you drink behind the bar with your customers, you can only do that so much before you're completely shit faced. And
Right.
do a little bit of cocaine. It's not even that the cocaine was, of course, it was doing chemically what it does with my dopamine levels, but it more than anything, a lot of the time was leveling me out so I could keep drinking the way I was drinking for as long as I could. And I had gone back to school at some point. This business of trying to be a superstar with this unrelenting critical voice inside of me and
Hmm.
no God became impossible. I mean, I was just going to put something up on the internet today, and I will at some point, about, success being spiritual. Success is spiritual, right? And so anything that we're trying to do, and in this case, I'm trying to get a record deal, something so hard where the odds are completely stacked against me. But even on Instagram, even as entrepreneurs, we're trying to do such hard things.
Yeah.
You can have the greatest vision of your life, but you are going to have to stay the course for an ungodly amount of time, most likely.
Yeah.
And what that is going to require is that you have an unbelievable capacity to confront fear, to shatter limiting beliefs, to embrace uncertainty, to have incredible amounts of self compassion. And that's all spiritual. I had
Mm.
none of that, none. And so I end up going back to school. School was just so safe. It was like
This was after the overdose. So you decided to then
this
transition back into school because
no,
it was safe.
this is the culmination. Like literally the night that
Yeah.
I overdosed
Yeah.
was the same night, because I was partying in celebration of
Okay.
the same night I got accepted into my doctoral program for physical therapy.
Okay.
So on the one hand, I leave entertainment and I kind of slide it over into a little side compartment. Like I'm teaching dance in some really cool studios in the
Hmm.
city. We're gonna go back to school because school
Safe.
does not make me feel
Hmm.
that unrelenting anxiety and shame and rejection that entertainment did. So we're gonna go to school and we're gonna work so hard. We're gonna grind until we drop, because as a type A, unrecovered perfectionist, we're super good at that. But then to celebrate the A's and the wins and certainly the acceptance into the program of your dreams, we're going to call the cocaine dealer. So, I say that because a lot of listeners, a lot of people who hear this, especially if you've not been around active addiction or haven't had an active addiction of your own, you would look at that and be like, please tell me that was rock bottom. Please tell me this is where the light
Right.
came in.
Right.
This is where
Right.
you start to find God.
Right.
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 That is so not what happened. It's a fascinating thing. It was so scary for me, obviously, right? On a physical. I mean, I did not want to die. So that I came that close to it was terrifying. But what I understand now, all these years later, because I'm going to be in a couple of weeks 17 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
to be very clear, sometimes people say sober and they mean free from alcohol, but when I say sober, I mean I have not had a mind altering drug that affects me from the neck up in 17 years. So we're talking about sober from every mind altering substance. It One of the things that is required to be at the bottom, and I really think that is where we find God. And the bottom looks different for everyone.
Hmm.
But what I understand now, because my work now is so much more trauma informed, is that we have to be at bottom so terrified of continuing to pick up the survival skills that we have relied on, that have kept us alive.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be so terrified of picking them up and using them because we've done it already and we've seen how that tape plays out.
Right.
And that version of our lives has to be so frightening that even though we don't know where we're going, we will do anything
Not to be there.
not to be there,
Yeah.
to go somewhere new. And that is this divine moment where the darkness you've been living in is like it's almost arrested for a moment, and there's this vessel that's cracked open, and it's where the light of God can finally start to come rushing in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. In my case, that time in my life, which was in a marital crisis, totally unrelated to my active addiction, but completely related to, wait a minute, I've been able to perfect and control everything else outside of me for pretty damn well for a really long time. So surely I can do it with this man. Even though he's not looking me in the eye, he's not having sex with me, he's going on a bunch of trips. It really seems like he's cheating on me. He's swearing he isn't. There's something I'm going to do that's going to fix this. It was only when that absolutely didn't work, and the evidence was astounding that it didn't work. And I was filled with complete self hatred, rage, and anxiety in sobriety, right? Which means that I was feeling it times 10.
Oh, yeah.
That is when I was face down in a pit of despair.
So that was the rock bottom for you. You were able to overcome the active addiction. You were able to overcome those things. And then when faced with this further challenge of feeling out of control in your relationship,
Yep.
that was when God said, "Girl, I've been here the whole time."
Yep. And it went on a little bit longer because that was the breaking point where my hands went up, and there was a readiness and a willingness that I had never had before in my life to try something new,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the first step. Then I remember not too long after, I mean, I was now moved out officially. I had moved out and slept on a lot of couches.
I was going to ask you what was that final moment with the marriage that was like, okay, like,
what was going on was we were fighting so badly, so often, that I slept over a friend's place for a weekend thinking like we just need to cool off.
right.
And then my husband was like, I don't think we're ready to live together again. Then I stayed at a sponsor's house for a month. She was heavy into God, and I was so raw, and I wasn't ready for that version. I needed a different kind of, like, a compassionate.
Well,
Really
you needed a transition between her and where you were, and there was no transition. It was she was the, and I can see it because I know it for myself. She was the person who was in your face about it, and you were like, "Bruh, I'm just gonna totally, repel this concept completely because you are way over the top."
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
another recoil. It was another
Yeah.
recoil,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was about a month of my life. And then I stayed with a girlfriend in recovery who mostly wasn't in her apartment for about 3 months. At the end of that stint, I'll never forget this. I was in New York City. I guess I was visiting family. I called my husband, hoping again, are we ready now? I mean, it's really sad when I think about it. There's where I was and how little I loved myself. I was still waiting for his okay.
Yeah, you were looking for his approval and his validation and in order to gain your sense of self.
He was my higher power, 100%.
Yeah.
He was my God. And he was like, it doesn't make sense. And I remember I called a friend in recovery, screaming, flipping out. And she was like, Samantha, this is insane. And I'm not going to tell you what to do about your marriage. If you're not ready to leave it, that's fine. You can't live like this. So you're going to need to get a place that's actually yours and heal. This was the equivalent of the getting caught and suspended from university. It was death. It was an absolute failure
Yeah.
of my survival skills in this case. And the idea that I was going to actually have to find a place, sign a lease, commit
Mm.
to the world, to myself.
Well, you were admitting to yourself it's maybe it's not over, but it's pretty damn close.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That was like proof. Whereas sleeping on a couch wasn't real yet. There was still some stuff to do to make it
right. You were still going to go back, and you didn't have to go as far as to have your own place. You were still in that place. Yeah. Total denial.
When I got into that place, it wasn't furnished. I remember getting a mattress. I put the mattress on the floor. First night in the place, laid on the mattress, looked up at the ceiling. It was a loft apartment, really high ceilings, beautiful place. And I'm sobbing.
Mm-mm.
And I'm just thinking, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do? And I thought about all the ways for my whole life, someone or something else has soothed me to sleep.
Mm.
My mom would stroke my hair as a young girl. It would always put me to sleep. Drugs and alcohol could always put me to sleep. And then my boyfriend, fiance, now husband, would take over for many years my mother's job and stroke my head to sleep.
Mm.
And now I was alone.
Mm.
And this little voice showed up
Mm-hmm.
and said, you are going to put your arms around yourself.
Mm.
And we're going to soothe ourselves to sleep. And you're going to be all right.
I love that.
And I really did. I turned onto my right side. I wrapped my arms around myself. It was so awkward. I was hysterically crying. And eventually I fell asleep. That was the very beginning. I didn't know it at the time of hearing God.
Yeah.
I then went at some point in those early weeks in that apartment to another 12-step meeting. And I heard this woman speak from the podium. And she had a lot more time sober than I did. She had also had a wild story, which many of us do in recovery. But a part of her story was that she had killed somebody in a drunk driving accident. And I'm thinking about the shame I carried in my life, the shame I still had in that moment. And she seemed free from any kind of emotional prison. And I was like, how? I didn't have any room to judge her. Nothing. I felt no judgment. I wanted to know how she had access to that kind of freedom. And I rushed up to her at the end and I said, will you sponsor me? This woman took me through the steps in a way that would eventually shape the book that I wrote. All those years later, that would be the beginning of not just a blueprint for my healing, but a roadmap back to God. And that was when I was 30. And the real breakthrough, I say this all the time when I share about my story, but it's because it's what's changed my life, yes, but saved it. I was 5 years sober and I had gone through the steps multiple times in a very thorough way. And the steps always talk about God. And I was getting a little more comfortable saying it, but God wasn't really in my life. That wasn't who I went to for reliance and certainty and comfort. It was just like, I'll borrow your faith till I have some of my own, but I don't really have any. So whatever. It sounds good for you, but I did the steps. I did whatever steps I could, especially the ones that weren't God heavy. And so the 9th step was like making an amends. Of course, I had made some very tough amends. to people that I had hurt, especially my husband. And I remember getting to the ninth step with this woman. So this will be now the fourth time around. And I'm feeling angry and I'm coming into her with an edge. And she's like, "What?" I was like, I can't believe I'm gonna make another amends to my husband. I know I cheated on him 7 years ago. A lot of times with people I don't love and I don't care about and I don't even remember. I know I did all that. And I know it really sucks that I did all that. But I have apologized. I have also made a living amends by not being a cheater in all the, like,
Right.
how many times
do I have to repent?
Sorry. She's like, no, like you're missing the whole thing. I don't want you to make an amends to him. I want you to make an amends to yourself.
Yes.
I was so confused. I was genuinely so separate from the notion that that was a thing people did that I was like, is this a trick? I don't understand that's even a thing people do, let alone a thing that could be done in recovery. Why has no one said that to me?
Lay down that shame, girl. Lay down that shame. That's it. That step
That's
was lay down the shame and free yourself to walk forward.
like she had done extensive 12-step work. She had been in extensive therapy. She had been in multiple 12-step programs, not just AA, but Al-Anon and some of the more advanced programs that have the same 12 steps, but they start to broaden the lens through which you work them. They talk about things that we can't control, like people, places, and situations. Institutions. And so that is the angle from which she was sort of coaching me. And once I did the rigorous work around self amends, self forgiveness, self compassion, and rerouting my self talk, which was so deeply ingrained and so unrelenting. I mean, it was all day, all the time. So, in these weeks and days and months that I was living in this apartment, there were about 8 months that I was in there. What happened in the awareness that I could possibly be separate from the mistakes I made. Now there were two identities. There was the Sam that had always existed, that hated the things she did and deserved the punishment she got. New Sam that was like, wait, I can forgive myself for that. Ooh. So they were walking around together, and then the old Sam, of course, super reinforced, would show up and say what she always said. No wonder you're in this fucking situation. This is what you get for what you did. Are you happy now? And I would have to be like, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hey, girl. Hey, it's you again. I know why you're here. I know why you're here. And you are here for a really good reason. You've actually been trying to protect me my whole life, but you're actually killing me right now. These survival skills are threatening not just my safety, but my spirit. And I'm trying to be a woman who loves and forgives herself over here. And so if that's the case, I'm going to need you to, like, if you can't believe that yet, that's okay. But I'm going to need to just say some other things instead that just sound really different than what you're saying. Like, God, this is so hard. This is the most painful, most frightening period of my life because every skill I ever used to not just exist, but to succeed is gone. It's done and over now.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm going or who I'm becoming, but I know I want to be a woman who speaks to herself differently than that. So you're just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other, Sam. And we're going to be all right. We over here, you over there, all of the parts that have been protecting you your whole life, we're all going to be all right. This is, by the way, not yet God. I mean, it is God right now in hindsight. Of course, this was God working in and through me, but that didn't even come up yet. It was the beginning of the separation of me and my shame, so that right, this over here and this over here. Well, now instead of it all being here, Sam and this giant pile of
Mhm.
shame
Mhm.
between my head, my heart, and my intuition, now that they were separate, there was a channel, a way
Yes, you could
for life.
absolutely connect. You had reconnected yourself so you could connect to
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Then I heard the whisper.
Mm.
Aftermath of doing this work rigorously, I started to hear the whisper of this other thing, this other entity, this other part of me, this other force, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. I call it God today. And I knew it was something radical and unconditionally loving just by nature of the way it sounded, the way it felt, and the way it showed up. It was so radically different than anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And I always say it has, not had, the quality of four C's because it makes it easy to put in a container for people listening. It was clear, calm, curious, and compassionate
Mm.
every single time. And remember, I had a voice that was just
Oh, yeah, not like that.
obsessed,
Yeah.
dominating, ridiculing.
You know what I love? You know what I love about this whole conversation is that there are so many people out there who don't know how to get from that person who's there all the time in and through the steps. It's like they don't know. Like you are doing an amazing job at articulating the process so that people can believe, oh, if she started there
Yep.
and she's where she is today, let me hear her process because it might help me.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
you're a very accomplished woman. You have accomplished a lot. And I know that there are still many more things that you're going to accomplish. And we had a big talk last week about things that you're going through and stuff that you're working on. And I know that how bright your star is. And now that I hear where you came from, like I want to go find everybody who is
Yeah.
Sam from 29 years old and throw them at your doorstep. You know
I
what I
know.
mean?
I
Because
know.
the important part of your story isn't necessarily the relationship with God that you could hear. It's the relationship with God you had when you couldn't hear it.
Hmm.
And recognizing that until you reconnected fully to yourself, that you were never going to actually be able to hear it, but he was always there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's the message. That's the message that so many people need to hear that are struggling with addiction, that are in recovery, that may not even be in recovery or addiction, but may just be in such a negative self-talk place of their life
Yeah.
that they don't think anything's there to help them either.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is also why my work, yes, I have a doctorate in the body, and for many years, my work was so body focused
Mhm.
on fitness, strength, mobility, injury prevention. I love all of those things still to this day. But if we want to talk about, I think my work really straddles nicely the tension of where science meets the soul.
Yes. Yes.
And I love that because I really think both are extraordinary. And there's an art to how we put that together for our own healing and the
Mhm.
trajectory of our own lives. But
Well, let me ask
when
you this question before you get too much further because we're getting short on time. And this is a big conversation.
I know,
Are you willing to do another episode with me?
oh yeah,
Okay. Because I think that the next piece really is breaking that down, going through the work you are doing now, talking a little bit about your relationship with God and from 30 to today, right? But then also breaking down exactly what it is that you're working on now, because I think the somatics behind it are so critical to people actually being able to make the transition from that place of shame and fear and guilt and all of that into the person who can fully regulate themselves and show up in connection with God.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're willing to do it, I say we halt up right here, right now, and we get on the calendar for another day.
100%. And I think to wrap this up in a bow and tease what is to come, what I understand now about this whole presentation, because I've had to boil it down. Now I speak on stages. So how am I expressing such complex stuff in a way that's so unbelievably related to the human experience? And it just comes down to safety. It really does. My whole life, I didn't feel safe, and I did what I need to do to establish safety. In early recovery, I didn't feel safe. The steps didn't make me feel safe. Eventually, my survival skills made me wildly unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
So now I had no safety outside and no safety inside. That was rock bottom. When I did the steps in this new way that was more trauma informed, I could establish a sense of safety inside, which meant that I could regulate, which meant I was reconnected to self and God was allowed to enter.
Yeah.
We cannot access God when we feel, whether it's real or not, that we are under threat. Or if we do, it's much, much harder. And so from the standpoint of childhood trauma, of burnout, overwhelm, this insane demand that is placed on all of us today, I just really want to remind people, whatever it is, if you're disconnected from the light of the Creator, which I can fully say today and stand behind, whatever you need to do, if it's just barefoot on the ground with the sun on your face for 2 minutes, to establish a sense of safety, whatever you can do that is accessible, run in that direction. And we'll be off to a start.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Such great advice. And I am so grateful to have met you in my life. And, we came through each other through Jen Gottlieb's Stage Leaders, and you reached out to me to connect with me, and I'm grateful that you did that, and I'm so blessed to have you a part of my life, and I'm excited for the listeners to bring you in and allow you to be a part of their lives too, because I don't really, addiction and recovery is an extreme, to your point. You said it at the beginning of the podcast, and what you teach and help people understand doesn't have to be that extreme in order to bring them to where they would like to live in their life. Like, you don't have to come from recovery. You don't be having to come from an active addiction situation. You can have something just as easy as not being comfortable in your own home because of a relationship you have with a spouse, or not being comfortable at your work because of relationships that you have with coworkers, that can completely change your connection to yourself and completely change your connection to God and give you a physical, like a physical feeling of anxiety and stress and all of that, that literally will give you cancer. So so I can't wait to dive into this, because people have to understand it doesn't have to be about drugs. It doesn't have to be about alcohol. It doesn't have to be about all that. Yes, your story, to your point in the beginning, is from a place of extreme, but what you are helping people with now you don't have to start there to have the same issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So good. So good. Well, I want to thank you for being on today. I'm excited. We're going to do some more together. And in the meantime, can you tell everybody how they can find you before they listen to the next episode?
Yeah, I'm this year stepping up how active I am on all the platforms, but for sure you'll get my attention the fastest if you DM me on Instagram, and I do respond. It's me, it's not a bot or my team, at Dr. Samantha Harte, Harte, or go to my website and you can check out all the things I do, and you can easily book a free discovery call or just send me a quick email. And that is drsamanthaharte.com.
I love it. I love it. And I just want to thank you again so much for coming on today. And I look forward to the rest of our chat.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to Evolve Through God, and we will catch you on the next episode.